views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren Jaime. If anyone asks the question, what are the social justice forums about? We take a look at many of the inequities that people face. We also present multiple points of view. We have conversation and dialogue where we just really try to get to the heart of the matter. We encourage you to stay with us because the Social Justice Forum starts right now. And welcome back. The Delta virus has mutated over time, resulting in genetic variation in the population of circulating viral strains over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. With cases continuing to rise in countries like India, Nepal, and the United Kingdom, many health officials are encouraging people to get vaccinated to protect themselves from potential strains. The vaccine has proved highly effective at preventing severe COVID-19 illness, despite a new analysis showing Black and Hispanic Americans are lagging behind white and Asian Americans when it comes to vaccination rates. And joining us now and sharing a little bit more in the discussion is the Director of Clinical Education and Research in Tropical Pathology and Infectious Disease Association, Dr. Lane Rowling. And we've had him on before. And Dr. Rowling, good to have you back again.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure to have this conversation. Give us a little bit about where we are right now. I mean, the last time we talked, the virus was at a certain level, and we've seen things come down by way of rate of infection here in America. But when we talk about looking towards the future, we're approaching the summer months, and still a lot of concern.
Well, the reality here is that that's where people made a mistake at last year. People real weekend, people have barbecue, and then it's this false sense of security because some of the states have rolled back the mandates of wearing masks. In reality, the virus has always been here. The virus numbers have always been the same, but just not reporting on the virus. And like I've said before, for you to be able to move into the future, you have to understand what you're dealing with. Now, what we're dealing with now at this moment in time is a Delta P mutation, which is a mutation off of the original alpha virus. And this virus, the Delta P mutation, is a combination hybrid mutation of the South African strain and also the Indian strain, which makes this virus immune to vaccination. Vaccines do not work on it. The vaccine never worked on the South African strain, the beta strain, from day one. But the reality is that this is our new world. I've said this before, the SARS infection is not global. Is global, but is endemic. And what we mean by endemic is not just pandemic, it's endemic. The virus is in the society now. It's here to stay. It'll be here for the next 50 years. So here's the reality, folks. I just got back from Arkansas a week ago. I spent a week there studying the SARS-CoV virus in rural America. And in Arkansas, it's in the newspaper, the ICU beds are all full up with COVID patients now. And so we're getting ready to head into September, October, November, which I call hump months, where there's going to be a severe devastation on society, again, driven by these new Delta P mutation and the mutation cells. And we have a long ways to go, and the fatalities, hospitalization is going to go up. Today in LA, they made it mandatory to wear a mask again. We're going to have lockdowns in the UK, lockdowns around the world are occurring. France is going into their fifth wave. Germany's about to shut down, and America is going to be shutting down probably in the next month or so. That's just the reality.
So you believe that with the way that things are going right now, that we're facing another shutdown again?
Oh, I believe 150% we're going to go to a shutdown, and because guess what's happening? The virus is going to drive what's going to happen. Politics, policies are not going to drive this virus away. You have to have effective protocols and procedures in place, and we have a non-effective protocols and procedures because everybody's doing what they wanted to do. For example, the state of Alabama, Texas, and Florida, people didn't have to wear a mask. And guess what? They have the highest infection rates right now as we speak, just like in Arkansas. LA, I had an attitude where, the virus is going to go away. We're vaccinating people, so we don't have to wear a mask a month ago. So guess what's happening now? They're making it mandatory. You have to wear a mask in LA and California again. The reality, folks, is that this virus is already going to do what it's going to do. The vaccines gave people a false sense of security. I've said it before. I'll say it 1,000 times again. You have to make sure you're getting your information based off of guys that are experienced in the profession, real infectious disease guys, real virologists that deal with really deadly viruses on a daily basis. Let me repeat this again for everybody on this platform. I don't care what vaccine you get, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, J&J. The reality is that the antibodies, the neutralizing antibodies, only last for 81 days. And on day 85, day 90, you can be reinfected, get reinfected, get sick, and die. And in fact, the CDC just came out the other day saying that, they have 4,000 people in Connecticut that were vaccinated and they got reinfected again. And there have been people that have been reinfected and they're transmitting disease to other people. So it shows, and the vaccine is one part of the solution, and it's not to be all to cure this problem, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be having this big spike in cases around the country. And my prediction, my belief, as the rate we're going, we'll be shutting down again in September, October, in the next several months.
Wow. Talk to me about vaccines. We talked about vaccinations the last time that we got together. You had made a recommendation on the last show talking about the COVAX vaccine. Where are we with that?
Well, I mean, COVAX is a great vaccine platform. I love the platform. I love the technology, because you're not going to have the major side effects that you're going to have versus the Pfizer, the Moderna, the AstraZeneca vaccine platforms. And then also the COVAX produces, 35,000 levels of neutralizing antibodies. It produces more antibodies than all the vaccines put together. But the reality is that, once again, we have to still deal with the science and the medicine. And the COVAX vaccine is made off the alpha strain. You have to understand, folks out there, when you're dealing with vaccines, you have to get the vaccine is predicated and made off of a particular virus strain. And so the initial strain that everybody was talking about was the D614, the Wuhan strain from 2 years ago. So what happened? How is this working in the real world? Well, you go get a patient that's infected with the Wuhan strain. You take their blood out of them, you cultivate the virus, you make a virus out of that particular strain. And this is what the strain is based off of: Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, even COVAX is based off the Wuhan strain. Well, guess what, folks? That Wuhan strain vaccine has no effect on these new Delta mutations. That's just a fact. We can talk about the Beta P1 Brazil strain. We can talk about the Gamma strain. We can talk the Lambda strain. We can even talk about the main virus that's driving the pandemic and endemic infection is the Delta strain. These vaccines have no effectiveness at all. That is the reality. You can't make it up in a science book. This is what you have to deal with. That is why it's important, when I talked about earlier about when you roll out a vaccine platform, you have to understand what the antibody level is for that population. So for you go down there to get your vaccine, they need to measure your antibody level, see if you've been exposed. Do you have any antibodies, even protective antibodies? And then what happens, you get a shot. And then 21 days, you come back, whatever, Pfizer, et cetera, you measure antibodies again. You measure antibodies at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, because that shows you if the community, that's what we have, effective herd immunity, is protecting. The numbers of virus cases are low. But in this case, nobody's done this. And this is why we have an utterly failed vaccine program. We have an utterly failed, platform for controlling the infection. And this is why we're going to be heading into the new future, where the virus, the Delta strain, is going to be driving, and the numbers are going to go tremendously up. It's going to be worse than what last year was.
Yeah. Back to COVAX for a second. Is it coming out, or where do we stand with that?
COVAX is already out in Asia. It's out in also Dubai and different foreign countries, and it's going through its last protocol checks and balances by the FDA before being released here in the United States. But once again, let me repeat it again. It doesn't matter if it's COVAX, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. These vaccines are made for the Wuhan strain. These vaccines have no effectiveness, iota, one bit, on the South Africa strain. Doesn't have an effect on the Indian double mutation or the Indian triple mutation. And now there's another virus out there called a hybrid mutation, which is a combination of the Vietnam strain and also the Indian strain. And so the vaccines is one part of the solution, but we're not there yet because we do not have a vaccine that has multiple capabilities to attack all these various mutations. That is what makes RNA viruses very difficult to treat. So you and your listeners need to understand that you need to make sure that you're wearing a mask in a situation like this. This is a virus. There's nothing to debate about constitutional rights. Don't wear a mask. You're going to find yourself in a pretty bad situation. Make sure you continue to wash your hands. If you're riding the New York subway, do not touch the poles that hold your hand because they're infected with the SARS virus. You make sure that you create your own bubble to protect yourself in these dense areas because this will be a source of infection. Here's another thing that people need to understand is that this virus is so infectious, it will affect you within 5 seconds. So you're on a train, you're in a room, somebody cough, you will be infected within 5 seconds of being exposed.
So as we talk about this and keeping people safe, you're talking about wearing masks, but then if I go to work and, my job says, listen, we unvaccinated people, you don't have to worry about wearing masks. Vaccinated people, you don't have to worry about wearing masks. Unvaccinated people, it's encouraged to wear masks. But you're saying no matter what, whether you're vaccinated or not, it's still necessary these days to continue mask wearing.
The vaccine is a program that started off bad because nobody sat down and explained to people what a vaccine is made. What the vaccine is really a modified virus. We're infecting with the virus to create an immune reaction. That's the same thing as a vaccine. We modify the virus, we inject, you get an immune reaction. It's like being infected with the virus without, it being modified in one way or the other. The reality is that you have to wear a mask. There's no debate about this. This is a respiratory viral infection. And with these new Delta mutation that can infect you within 5 seconds, it's mandatory that everybody wears a mask to protect you and the other person. But the reality here is that you have to understand this Delta P mutation is the game changer. And in infectious diseases, 5 seconds to infect you, you better wear a mask. And here's the deal about masks, where a lot of people make mistakes that the system did not explain to you. As a biological warfare expert, I'm an expert when it comes to masks. I deal with nerve gas, mustard gas, Ebola, viral hemorrhagic fevers from Bolivia, Argentina, you name it. I've dealt with. Mask is a very important part of that front line. So, and the mask has to be an antiviral mask. Let me repeat, the mask has to be an antiviral mask. All these masks that you guys are running around wearing, surgical masks, N95s, FFP2s, FFP3s, these masks have only been tested against bacteria. This is a virus. What does an antibacterial mask got to do with a virus, which is so small, 124 nanometers, 0.5 microns will go through your mask and infect you.
So we talk about masks. I see one that's right behind you in the background. Is that the kind of mask that a person should be wearing during a time such as this?
No, this is a surgical mask. The masks that people need to be wearing are the antiviral masks that people can see me and all the people that follow me on Instagram and Facebook and people wearing around the world on airplanes. These are the masks that Dr. Rowling wears in the real world. Is the antiviral mask, and that's the reality. And this antiviral mask is going to be part of your frontline defense. We have antiviral masks for adults. We have antiviral masks for even the most vulnerable people of our population, the children. And that's very important because we have a problem of forgetting about children need to also have a mask too, especially with these new Delta mutations, which affects everybody equally in proportion.
Yeah, I want to shift gears for a minute, talk a little bit about nitric oxide for a minute and nitric oxide based therapy. And you have this nitric oxide based therapy that's out there possibly preventing severe cases in African Americans. Share with me a little bit about the nitric oxide based therapy.
Well, this is one part of the solution. When we talk about creating people's bubbles to protect yourself, your family, first of all, you have to understand this is a virus. You have to have things to disinfect your feet. You got to have an antiviral mask. You have to have great antiviral hand wash, not antibacterial hand wash. You have to have air sanitizer viral in your homes, in your businesses. And then another part of that equation from A to Z is what we call immunosupport. And we have nitric oxide has the ability to help mitigate the symptoms for you progressing to the more severe form of the COVID-19 disease. You get infected, you take this medication, and then what happens is that it prevents you from going down the road to severe things, to ventilation, clots, and all the other bad things you can get it. But guess what? Dr. Rowland and his team came up with immune support, where people are able to get the nitric oxide tablets from us every day, not waiting on an FDA drug. You can get this and take it every day as a natural supplement. And that's going to be a game changer, because we have to get this medication, the supplement, to everybody in the world now. You take one pill every day, maybe 2 pills every day, and this is going to help prevent you from possibly getting the COVID-19 infection. If you do, it's going to mitigate that and keep you from progressing down to a severe form of it.
Yeah. So if we could talk for a few seconds about where we go from here, because obviously we got a long way to go. As a doctor, as one who works in the field, talk to me about your thoughts as you're watching America slowly open up, and in some states rapidly open up.
Well, what I'm seeing in my eyes as an infectious disease specialist that deals what I call boots on the ground. I've been in Arkansas. I've been in rural Mississippi. I see it. I was there 2 weeks ago. I'm going back to Arkansas on the middle of July to spend another week in there helping educate the rural areas, implementing technology protocols to prevent them from completely imploding. At the rate we're going, the United States is going to implode. It already has imploded because of this virus, because this virus is out of control. The Delta mutations are doing what they needed to do. So when you ask me about what I see is that we have a long ways to go. And the reality is that if people take this stuff serious, this is going to continue to drive this infection all the way around. And then and most important is that we have to have effective communication, education. I have to admit to everybody right now, the Urban League has joined me. Urban League has joined Dr. Rolling out a program to help save rural America and people are disenfranchised people, brown in color, in different communities, educating them about the COVID-19 itself, understanding the virus, how do we prevent themselves, and how to save our society, because we have to get kids back in school. We have to get businesses back working. We have to get money being driven through our society. But this is a reality when you deal with a virus that you really don't understand.
When we talk about African Americans and Hispanics, obviously communities of color adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's been a great push all across America for more and more people to get vaccinated. And so just give us, your take as you're hearing the push for more vaccinations. What would you want people to know?
Well, the reality is that you said this is a social justice platform. Well, I was in Arkansas 2 weeks ago, and they gave me the key to the city of Camden, Arkansas. But here's the reality, folks. We talk about hesitancy or why Blacks and Hispanic people are not getting vaccinated. And this is a reality. This is one part of the problem. As I was at the mayor's office talking to their executive leadership in Camden, he told me what was happening. And this is happening. Blacks in that area are being devastated by the COVID-19. So he calls the governor of Arkansas and says, hey, I need the vaccine. Can we get the vaccine? So the governor sends 100 vaccines down to Camden, Arkansas, to Walmart. Well, guess what happened? We want to talk about vaccine hesitance. Not one Black person got that vaccine because 100 white people got the vaccine first. So the mayor called the governor of Arkansas again and said, hey, we need another set of 100 because none of the Black people in my community got it. Sure enough, the Blacks went down to the white pharmacists in Camden, Arkansas, and guess what happened? They did not get the vaccine because all the white people got the vaccine. He called back up again to Little Rock and says, hey, we're not getting any of these vaccines. So the governor sent down a Black doctor who drove that vaccine to Camden, and he gave it himself. So what my point is that we have systemic racial discrimination. You have white pharmacists, white Walmart calling their white friends to get the vaccine, and the black people were left out. So this is one of the things that people don't talk about. It's not about sometimes blacks having hesitancy, is having the ability to get the vaccine because of the racial discrimination, and that these folks did not have access because they were blocked because of the white pharmacists, the white Walmart, making sure that the white people got it in Camden, Arkansas.
Yeah. Before we go, for people who want to get connected to you, find out more about you, what do they need to know?
Well, I mean, you can follow me on the Black News Channel every Sunday night. That's always a great platform. About 52 million people get to see me on Sunday, and also the Black News Channel is a voice of the community, Black and also brown people. They can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Rolling, or Facebook me. And, it's just been a pleasure to be able to be that voice for African Americans because of my background in infectious diseases and stuff like that. And the reality is that I base all my decisions and my education based off of medicine and science, facts, and that's the reality. So, folks, you need to make sure that you take this stuff serious, pull your head out of the sand, because the reality, the storm is already here. And you need to make sure you protect yourself and your family, because I promise you, some of you guys are not going to make it to 2022. That's just a fact, because you're not listening. If somebody tells you not to wear a mask, you are complete crazy if you do not wear a mask. That mask is there to protect yourself, and that mask has to be an antiviral. You get on a subway, you better have your mask. You will be infected within 5 seconds with the new Delta mutation, folks. And I look forward to coming back here in another month, so we can see all the things I talk about that are happening in the real world. And we are going to the point where we're going to probably end up like India in the next month and 2 months, where we're not going to have oxygen tanks. And what's happening in India. Their society is completely devastated. Same thing in Brazil. And we need to make sure that folks are understanding that if we do not get control of this, the children in Brazil are dying now like flies from the COVID-19. So we need to make sure we protect our children, and you protect your children, and make sure that we have a very good outcome with this new pandemic, endemic Delta mutation.
Yeah. Dr. Lane Rowland, I want to thank you so much, my brother, for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums, bringing us the information in regards to the virus as well as vaccinations. Good to have you again.
Thank you. Have a super fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. And be safe out there.
All right, you take care now.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye.
All righty. Well, we want you to stay with us here on the Social Justice Forums. We do have more show coming up in a few minutes, so stay with us. back to the show. The Immigrant Defense Project is a not-for-profit organization that's working to secure fairness and justice for all immigrants in the United States, and it promotes fundamental fairness for immigrants accused or convicted of crimes. They seek to minimize the harsh and disproportionate immigration consequences of contact with the criminal justice system by working to transform unjust deportation laws and policies, and educating and advising immigrants, their criminal defenders, as well as other advocates. And here now to share a little bit more is the Immigrant Defense Project's Senior Policy Associate, Jose Chapa, and then Senior Policy Attorney, Shim. And both of you, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having
you. And first, I guess I'll start with Jane and give us a little bit, ladies first. When we talk about immigration reform, obviously something that continuously is a topic of conversation here in the United States. When we look at things from your perspective, how do you see them right now?
That's a great question. Immigration reform is something, that has been a pressing issue for people for decades now. And I know that the immigrant rights movement has gained a lot more, power over the years, and people are really looking for a path to status. That's been one of the big demands that's been raised, in particular with Dreamers. And obviously, I think you're probably familiar with that. For our organization, we focus on people who've had contact with the criminal justice system. And I'll give a little bit of background about our organization, which kind of explains how we come into this moment. So we were founded after about 20 years ago. In 1996, Congress passed a huge set of immigration laws, but unlike the type of immigration reform we hear about now, it was actually to expand the reasons people can get deported. And a lot of those reasons were attached to contact with the criminal system. So what you saw was this really massive expansion in terms of what types of convictions or offenses or behavior or conduct could lead to you getting deported. And so our founder, Manny Vargas, was a defender at the time. And he was like, people don't understand what the implications of these laws are going to be. It's going to be, it's going to facilitate massive deportation in huge numbers that we haven't seen before. And it's all going to be sort of under this umbrella of criminalization and punishment. And so our organization was founded in the wake of those laws. And ever since, we've been fighting to ensure that people who have been criminalized or who have had, might have some type of criminal history are not kind of steamrolled by the immigration system, are informed of their rights, and are given an opportunity to stay in the country. So, when we talk about this moment and immigration reform, there's a lot of, people want status so they can fully participate in, public life and a bunch of other things, and access to resources and benefits and all of that. And, but what you don't hear about as much is all of the exclusions that are often on the table because people have, been arrested or done some time. And, for our organization, we see the way that doesn't allow for, second chances. It doesn't allow for looking at a person as a full human being, who they are today. And so we are really focused on making sure that the injustices of the criminal legal system, which I think people have become increasingly familiar with, are not just imported into the immigration system and accepted that, oh, because someone has done something before, or, there's a million documented ways that police and prosecutors are abusive, in particular in communities of color. And why would we take the outcomes from that system and use them to sort who deserves and doesn't deserve to stay in the country?
Yeah. And Jose, I'll bring you in. One of the other topics of conversation that you deal with is mass deportations. And we see ICE enforcement. We know in the last presidential administration, record numbers of people being deported with ICE intervention in the courtroom. We're now under a new presidential administration, but that does not mean that everything is all good.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the work that IDP has done is collect information on how many arrests and detentions and contact with ICE folks have had at courthouses, in particular here in New York State. So part of the campaign that IDP helped build was Nice Out of Courts campaign with a broad coalition of partners. We were able to pass the Protect Our Courts Act last year. And by the end of last year, December 2020, Governor Cuomo signed that piece of legislation into law, which would basically keep ICE from arresting or detaining people going to court, at court, or leaving court, where the most vulnerable individuals would go and have this contact with ICE officers. People were afraid to go to court and have any contact with court because of that fear and that chilling effect that happened across communities, not just in New York City, but across the entire state. And that is one way we are building the case against ICE here in the state of New York. Even though we had this horrible administration, ICE is still out there, and we are going to probably see more ICE activity in the coming months, even though we have a new administration. So we're definitely keeping our eyes open and seeing what is next.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about the legalization of marijuana. We know that many people, particularly communities of color, where many immigrants find themselves on the wrong side of the law just for this infraction itself. A little bit about the work that you're doing there and what you would like to see happen.
Yeah, earlier this year, we were very grateful here in the state of New York that the MRTA law passed and was signed by the governor. So that, of course, means that marijuana is now legal across the state of New York. But also, this kind of brings us some considerations for immigration. Also, if folks have had any sort of criminal conviction, and this, of course, regardless of status, it's very important for folks to talk to a trusted attorney, especially if you have any sort of contact with immigration officers, in order to not only expunge, but also vacate your old convictions. And this could have a huge impact on anybody's immigration status or immigration process moving forward. And this is something that IDP worked along with a broad coalition, again, of partners and legislators in order to make this happen. But, it's also important for people to know that even though marijuana is legal in the state of New York, it's still federally not legal. So that's another thing important, thing to consider, that you cannot go to federal places like the airport, for example, and travel with marijuana, or cross state lines, because every state has different laws in consideration to marijuana.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, and certainly as time continues to unveil, more and more people are becoming more and more familiar with these new laws, but yet and still a lot of people are still trying to navigate through this situation. Talk to me a little bit more, Jane, if you will, about some of the other policies, because many people may not be so familiar with much of the policy work that's going on behalf of immigrants. But what is it that you would want people to know and focus in on, particularly in this season?
Well, on the state level, we have been working on a project called the Justice Roadmap, which is a legislative platform that includes about 25 to 30 bills, all on criminal legal system reform and immigration reforms together. And the reason that advocates joined together around this platform, it's endorsed by, I think, 200 plus organizations around the state, is because the systems are so integrated in the way that they function. And so ICE really is just relying on local law enforcement, police, state troopers, to identify people who they can then go and come and go after, so that they basically are doing their legwork for them. And so if you're a non-citizen and say you get stopped by a police officer or arrested for something, that can trigger a whole slew of immigration consequences for you. And so the Justice Roadmap is really about looking at the entire experience, the system, the way that it's intertwined and entangled, so that, and rolling back a lot of those harms that people experience, and ensuring that criminal justice reform also takes into account the particular consequences that it can have in the immigration system if you're not a citizen. And I think one important thing to remember is in New York, we have so many different immigrant communities. So we have undocumented folks, we have people who've been longtime green card holders and they're not yet citizens, and everyone can still be impacted and could be potentially at risk.
Yeah, I want you to give me an opportunity to ask the question about having what those potential consequences are, right? We say an immigrant gets arrested, they're arrested. What happens after an immigrant gets arrested and the possible potential consequences that we may not be so familiar with?
So there's a lot of different things. I'll just try to think of a hypothetical. Say you get stopped by a police officer for, he's just stopping you on the street. Say he asks you some questions. I won't go into the different things police might do on the street to someone, a person of color that may be questionable, but say you get taken into the precinct before charges are even formally filed or you're convicted of anything or go through your process, they run fingerprints, and those fingerprints are shared with the feds. And they're shared with the FBI, and ICE has access to all of that data, and they can actually get a hit in their system if they find that you're undocumented. And that's regardless of what the outcome of your criminal case ultimately is. Or say you have a case from a long time ago, say you have a marijuana case from a long time ago, now we're in a moment that's legalizing marijuana, but they might say, oh, hey, actually that is an immigration violation that makes you deportable. And now we know where you are. We know that you're potentially living at this address, and they do serious surveillance in neighborhoods outside people's homes. And often the reason is because they get that notice from the fingerprinting.
Jose, if you will, share with us a little bit about NY for All, the campaign that you've got.
Yeah, and actually, in relation to that, in the New York for All Act, which was introduced these past couple of sessions and did not pass, but we hopefully will get it passed next year, would keep local agencies from sharing information with federal agencies like ICE. So if somebody were to go to a public hospital, somebody were to go to any a probation office or the DMV, for example, the New York for All Act would keep those agencies from sharing any sort of private information about anybody with any federal agency like ICE. And it's basically would make New York a true sanctuary state in that sense.
Yeah. So when we have this in terms of advocacy, obviously you've got these policies that are out there. Advocacy is really huge. How do people participate in really getting behind and supporting some of these initiatives? And if I'm watching on the show and saying, listen, this is something I really want to be passionate and activist about and really raise my voice and lend my voice to that, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I would suggest by educating yourself, first of all. And we are very grateful that at IDP we have a bunch of resources on our website where you can go on and learn a lot about what people's rights are. But in particular, next month on July 13th and 14th, IDP will be hosting a Know Your Rights presentation, Train the Trainer presentation on marijuana and what those new laws mean for New Yorkers all across the state. And it's being co-hosted by the Bronx Defenders, the Drug Policy Alliance, and the Legal Aid Society. People can visit our website, immigrantdefenseproject.org/marijuana if they want to register for that. And it will be a very a nice, comprehensive educational tool for people to know what their rights are in relation to marijuana in the coming years here in New York.
Well, Jane and Jose, thank you so much for joining us and being with us here on the show. Thank you. And as we continue to talk about this topic of immigration, we'll certainly have you back to discuss even more.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you both. And listen, we've got more show. Our show continues in a few.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting BronxNet.
Welcome back. For 20 years, the Sikh Coalition has defended Sikh civil liberties in the courtroom, classroom, community, and halls of Congress. The coalition is often the first and only line of defense for Sikh civil rights in America. Whether it's working to secure safer schools or prevent hate and discrimination, or creating equal employment opportunities, or empowering local Sikh communities, the Sikh Coalition's goal is to create a social climate in which Sikh Americans can live with dignity without being targeted for violence or discrimination. Joining me to share more details on the matter, I'm joined by the Senior Policy and Advocacy Manager at the Sikh Coalition, Nikki Singh. And Nikki, good to have you.
Hi, Daren. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And so when we talk about your organization really representing an underrepresented group of people.
Yeah, you know, I think you did a great job at kind of summarizing a lot of the work that our organization does. And I'll just add a little bit more background. You know, the Sikh Coalition was founded by community volunteers on the night of September 11th in response to a torrent of violent attacks against Sikh Americans throughout the United States. So in those early days, a group of Sikhs decided to take a stand against the civil rights abuses that our community faces. And so now the Sikh Coalition has transformed into the largest Sikh American advocacy and community development organization in the United States. And like you said, our work and our team, you know, we aim to create safer schools, prevent hate and discrimination, create equal employment opportunities, empower Sikh community members across the US, and just educate the larger American public about the Sikh faith and tradition.
And when we talk about hate and discrimination, obviously that's a real thing, and the Sikh community has seen a lot of that. Give us a little bit about what maybe we don't know when it comes to hate and discrimination within the Sikh community.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sikhs have been targeted by hate since they came to this country over a century ago. For example, in the early 1900s in Bellingham, Washington, lumberjacks attacked hundreds of Sikh mill workers in their homes, beating them, stealing their valuables, forcing them out of the city. And this became known as the Bellingham riots. And so, you know, those Sikhs have seen discrimination and harassment violence since we've been in this country. We really saw an uptick in that after September 11th. The first fatal hate crime casualty in a post 9/11 America was Balbir Singh Sodhi, who is a Sikh immigrant who was living in Mesa, Arizona, a small business owner, and he was shot and killed outside of his gas station. You know, we saw in 2012, a gunman with neo-Nazi ties killed 7 Sikhs at a Gurdwara, a Sikh house of worship in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And this massacre remains one of the deadliest acts of violence in an American house of worship in our nation's history. And Only since 2015 has the FBI even started tracking anti-Sikh hate crimes after a long campaign by our organization, by ally organizations. And since anti-Sikh hate has started to be tracked, Sikhs have consistently been among the top 5 most targeted faith groups. So, it really just validates some of our conservative estimates that Sikhs remain hundreds of times more likely to be targeted by hate in the US.
Yeah. And with that, there comes the need for policy advocacy and really raising your voice for awareness. What's been on the table for you lately by way of policy initiatives?
So the Sikh Coalition is a national organization. So we do work at the federal level as well as locally. And so federally, in May, President Biden signed into law the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And it's a really important first step to countering the threat of hate in America. And it's the first significant piece of federal hate crime legislation in 12 years. Thankfully, the bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in response to some of the anti-Asian hate that has surged during the pandemic. But also important to note that it includes the Jabara Hire No Hate Act, which will modernize hate crime reporting and provide new resources for survivors. So the Sikh Coalition has been advocating for the passage of the No Hate Act important provisions since it was first introduced in 2019. And while this is a historic first step forward, it's far from the end. Our organization will continue to fight for better state-level hate crime legislation, mandatory federal hate crime reporting, and other policy improvements. So some of the work, there is legislation at the state level that we're looking at as well in Wyoming, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, California, and then even here, in New York City, we're working on a religious literacy resolution. It's City Council Resolution 1257, and it would call on the Department of Education to provide age-appropriate religious diversity curricula for all students and to offer professional development for teachers in this area. So, doing so will make a safer, more educational, and more inclusive learning environment for students of all faith traditions. So I really would encourage people to reach out to their city council members and ask them to co-sponsor Resolution 1257.
How would you measure the fact of awareness? I mean, because when you think about violence and hate in the Sikh community, discrimination that goes on, this awareness campaign, I know you've launched it. It's, your organization is about 20 years in. But yet, and still, many people are still late to the table in addressing some of these issues. What are you finding by way of awareness? Are people becoming more and more aware, or is there an ignorance, if you will, to these crimes?
I think there certainly is an ignorance and just a lack of awareness in general about who the Sikh community is. And I think that's why, organizationally, we try to take a really holistic approach at addressing, the challenges that the Sikh community faces. So that means doing work in education, literally in schools, but also just raising general awareness about who Sikhs are, while also simultaneously working to hold those in power accountable and advocating for policy change federally at the state level and locally as well.
Yeah. What would you want people to know when it comes to knowing about the Sikh community?
I think what's important to learn about the Sikh community is that we've been here for a long time, and I would just encourage people to take an effort to learn about who Sikhs are. I think all of us can take steps to combat hate. It's really important to consistently speak up, stand in solidarity, hold people accountable, including those with influence. And not just for the community, not just for the Sikh community, but that accountability is necessary when we witness racism, xenophobia, and any type of bigotry against any minority community. And I think if I could leave people with one message is that Sikhs are incredibly resilient, and although we've faced a lot of hate, violence, harassment, discrimination, we really continue to meet those challenges through faith and with resolve.
Speak to us a little bit about the Jabara Hire Hate Act. No Hate Act, I should say.
Sure. So it's an act that would modernize hate crime laws. It is, the first significant, it's included as part of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. It's the first significant piece of federal legislation on hate crimes that we've seen in 12 years. So the goal with the Jabara Hire Hate Crime Act is to modernize hate crime reporting, but also to provide new resources for survivors.
And so as we look forward to some things on the table right now, what can people participate in terms of being allies in a time like this?
I think at the local level, as I mentioned, one of the things that we're working on is that city council resolution. According to a survey that we did in 2018, 62% of turban-wearing Sikh students in Queens, New York, experienced bullying. Another report that we did in 2014 showed that 67% of turban Sikh students across multiple geographic areas experienced bullying, which is a rate that is more than twice the national average. And so it's really important for people to take action and to call on their elected officials to support this kind of legislation, especially at the local level, because that has such an impact on people's day-to-day lives. And so that's definitely something I would encourage people to do. But on a broader scale, I think, just taking the time and effort to learn about the Sikh community.
Yeah. When you talk about the federal legislation, I mean, obviously federal legislation has been enacted, but let's talk about it on a local front. Talk to me about elected officials and how supportive have they been to your cause?
Yeah, I think elected officials, I think it varies. Thankfully, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act passed with bipartisan support. I think at the state level, it has definitely been challenging. We're looking at hate crime legislation in Wyoming, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, California, and I think there has been a struggle by a lot of civil rights groups, not just our organization, to just educate elected officials about the importance of having hate crime legislation. And so we continue to try to do a lot of that work so that, not just the Sikh community, but other vulnerable communities are protected as well.
And so as we're moving towards the summer, of course, a lot of people going back outdoors and a lot of things are happening. Talk to us about the community and what's happening as we approach the summer.
Yeah, the Sikh community is incredibly resilient. I think, there, as with everyone, there's an excitement to kind of move towards summer, to be able to, community in general, or Sangat, as we say, is really important to the Sikh faith. And so obviously with the pandemic and people having to stay inside, I think there was a real loss of that sense of community. And so I think people are excited to get back to that in person and not just having to do that virtually, but also, community service work is really important. And so being able to be out there and do some of that work, I think people are excited about doing that again as well.
Yeah. And so as we talk about legislation, a lot of policy, a lot of initiatives that are out there on the state level and definitely in the federal level. Talk to us a little bit more about the state, because as we talk about New York State, it seems like that's a little bit more of a hard nut to crack. And what kind of pushback are you getting? Because it seems like a no-brainer on many fronts, but yet and still, I know that you're getting some resistance.
Sure. So I'll start by saying that we're a nonpartisan organization, and so our work is really to connect with elected officials, on both sides of the aisle, and try to raise awareness about hate crimes that exist across the U.S. And so, one of the ways that we do that is through advocating for better data and reporting. Part of the challenge there is that a lot of the time law enforcement is just unaware of who the Sikh community is. So hate crimes, either they aren't categorized as Sikh or they are miscategorized. And then that creates a challenge, right? We know that data drives policy. And so for us to be able to advocate for legislation, we have to be able to look at the data. And so, we really start at the local level trying to advocate for better education, better reporting, better understanding of who Sikhs are, to then translate that data into effective policy.
Yeah, you've got police community relations, which is really, at an all-time high in terms of tension. Are you finding right now that your relationship with the police community, when it comes to talking about the issues, talking about the hate, talking about the discrimination, is being well received, better received? How do you describe it?
Yeah, we've worked with a few different city agencies, specifically the New York City Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. They hold, I want to say, quarterly meetings where members of the NYPD's Hate Crime Task Force join as well. And so, they've been really open to community dialogue. I know that they have recently created within the NYPD a task force specifically to address anti-Asian hate. But I think there is a lot more that can be done just to raise awareness, to report better, more efficiently, and I think stronger partnerships can be built with community organizations.
Yeah, before we leave, please give us an opportunity to know how can people connect with your organization and really be an ally.
Yeah, I would love for people to read more about the Sikh Coalition's work. You can follow us on Instagram at Sikh Coalition, visit our website, sikhcoalition.org. And, as a staff, we're all really accessible and happy to help the community however we can.
Nikki Singh, thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums from the Sikh organization. Glad to have you. And of course, come on back.
Thank you.
All righty. Nikki Singh, our guest on the Social Justice Forums. Well, we are at the end of our show. Want to thank you for joining us and watching the Social Justice Forums. Want to let you know we continue to promote conversation, dialogue, but really civic engagement. And we bring you the information so that way you can become more informed about the things that are affecting many people in and around our community. So next time we meet on the Social Justice Forums, I'm Daren, Jaime, saying take care, God bless, and we'll catch you on the next episode.